Hello, and welcome to the Do Hard Things podcast. Today, we are going to welcome Keith Troutman. He is first and foremost a man of God, a former professional baseball player, an instructor for baseball and softball, a guitarist, and instructor. So today, he is with us to share his story because we love highlighting people who have been athletes, who are athletes, and kind of the story of their journey. And I met Keith last week or 2 weeks ago during the storm, and I just felt like he was the kind of person who had a story that we all needed to hear. So Keith, welcome to the Do Hard Things podcast. We're so glad to have you.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. Praise God for this.
So we spoke a little bit, and first of all, you were a professional baseball player, and that was kind of where we began our conversation because I was talking to you about my son who plays baseball, and you said you do work with some kids, and then you started telling me kind of your story, and I was just fascinated by your story, and I only got part of it, and that's why you're here today to kind of fill us in.
Absolutely. From the beginning, my dad was not a sports guy. I grew up in Candler, North Carolina. It's about 15, 20 minutes west of Asheville. And apparently he asked me to pick up something and throw it to him when I was like 5. And I threw it and hit him in the stomach. And he had the wisdom to, like all parents do, like all parents want for their children to do something great, or what I found out is what all parents want is for children to recognize their spiritual gifts from God and use them. And he had the wisdom to grow that spiritual gift of me just being able to throw objects really fast.
I love it.
Yeah. Where it all started was Dad. My dad. He saw the gift that I had been given by God, and I didn't realize it was a gift then, but he grew that all through the years, and he instilled a work ethic in me to take care of that gift, to nurture it, grow it, to improve it, and that I have still today from my dad.
That's wonderful. I'm sure. Now, is your dad still with us?
Dad is still with us. He's 86. He's doing great. He still lives in the same house that I grew up in.
Oh, wow.
He was great. He built me a mound. I wouldn't even be standing here talking without Dad. He was my best buddy. He still is, and just a great man. I couldn't say enough about my dad.
And so did he play with you when you were a kid? Once he realized that you could throw, how did he encourage that? Did he sign you up for, where do you start with baseball? Like the little tiny kids with the T-ball. Yeah, where did you start with baseball?
Oh, goodness. In the backyard. Me and him throwing, him catching me was a common, it was daily. And us playing like mental games, like we would be like, there would be a pretend batter and counts, and he would say things like, you're in Yankee Stadium and the crowd's going wild and it's 3 balls and 2 strikes. So in the backyard, he built me a mound eventually. And just those times, we didn't have travel ball. There wasn't games every weekend. We literally had like 40 games a year back then. So it was more about the practice and the time with him than it was even going out to the games. But I grew up in Hominy Valley, and that's where I spent the majority of my time on those fields practicing, in the backyard practicing. But I played rec ball, and I could just throw faster than people could swing.
So would
growing
you
up.
say that people who saw you play when you were a little kid, they kind of knew you were destined for greatness when you were little?
Yes, yes, ma'am. I say this quite often. People would put me up on a pedestal, and people were in amazement of how fast I could throw, and idolized even. And I have a lot to say about that. So when we get to that, I have a lot to say about that, about idolizing someone with their spiritual gifts.
I read a great quote from Sandy Koufax last night that said he became a lot better pitcher when he quit trying to make people miss it and started trying to make people hit it. Tell us a little bit about that work, because you said you could throw the ball faster than everybody, and that is a gift, but you have to learn how to pitch. Just throwing doesn't make you a pitcher. How did you learn how to be a pitcher?
Okay, first of all, Sandy Koufax is a friend of mine.
Oh, wow.
Yes, I met Sandy Koufax in 1992.
God, that's incredible.
I was throwing a bullpen for the Dodgers, my very first year with the Dodgers. And he walked up, and you could just feel the atmosphere. And he stood behind me, and I knew who it was because Dad loved Sandy Koufax. Dad didn't idolize many people, but he loved Sandy Koufax. And so, so I think, well, I can speak for me. As a kid, I could throw very fast, so that was my safety. And that was my go-to thing. If I ever got in trouble, I would just try to throw harder. And it works. It worked for me at lower levels. And when somebody hits you, if somebody gets a hit or a home run, it like tears your whole world down. When you're like that, when you're thinking you want everybody to miss every pitch you're throwing, and you want to throw a perfect game, a no hitter, and all these things. Well, you find out when you get to a certain level at some point that the hitters get very good, and they don't miss stuff. And all of a sudden, not 94 miles an hour is not blowing people away. They're actually hitting it. So I think at that point, it was very difficult for me. I remember that point. It was 1994 when I actually called Dad, and I told him, I said, I can't do this anymore. And I said, I'm just not good enough. I was in single A, which is very high level. People don't realize how high of a level single A is. But I called home with tears in my eyes saying, I'm not doing good anymore. I'm not successful. And Dad, like he always did, I could talk about Dad the whole time. Dad gave me some tough love, which I needed. I needed a slap in the face, and I needed to find out what you're talking about, how to locate my fastball instead of putting all my faith in how fast I'm throwing. Which at that point I did. I had to, or I would have lost my baseball career at that point. So I went on this journey, Jed, of finding out how to locate my fastball, and I found out that location was the key, not velocity. I found out location was going to get me to the next level. And it was very painful because it's a pride breaker, which is a great thing that God puts us through. But yeah, them hitting the ball became, that's something that you actually crave. And if you look at it at first, it's like, well, they're better than me and I'm not as good. But then you factor in, hey, they're good athletes. They have gifts, and my location is going to make them hit the ball to one of our players, which is going to create an out. And that's a wonderful thing that God puts pitchers through. That's such a good thing.
When you realize that, you're destined to fail about a fifth of the time. The batting average for players, just in general, is around 250. I think everybody at once. Some hit much higher, some hit a little bit lower. How do you compartmentalize that and realize that, all right, so a quarter to a fifth of the time, I'm going to throw my best one up there, and he's going to hit it somewhere, and I've got to move on to the next guy?
Yeah, well, yes, that like I would face guys like Chipper Jones, Derek Jeter, Johnny Damon, David Ortiz, and guys like that. And so, yes, at first it would hurt me when they hit it. And of course I wanted to climb the ladder and get to the major leagues. And I don't think fame was really on my mind. It was part of it. And I'll share how God used that later. But it wasn't the money. It was just being excellent at a sport, at baseball. So my driving force was just being excellent. It really wasn't about God at the time. Early in my career, it was about me. So when I failed, it would break me down, and my emotions would go down, and I would be upset. And when I did good, then I would be all happy. And I realized even before I came to Jesus, I realized that, man, this is a roller coaster. And this failure, man, this stinks. And the good times, you're all happy, and then when you're getting hit around, like you're saying, and you have a bad couple of games, life is just miserable. And through that, God drew me in, because, well, that's one way that he draws us in, because life is a roller coaster. And just like a baseball game, it is up and down, and anything crazy can happen. Hitters are successful 3 times out of 10, and they're great. I mean, that alone is just life. It's like if you try to put your faith in that roller coaster, you're going to be disappointed. And you're going to think there's got to be something better than this roller coaster that I'm on. And so through that, what you're saying, that failure, the high level of failure, and especially in professional baseball, God used that to even draw me in to him. But to deal with that, I think ultimately my answer is 2 things. First of all, you would have to put your faith in something other than the sport. Because if you put your faith in that sport, well, the odds are going to tell you right there that you're going to be disappointed 70% of the time. And so that would steer you toward, where are you putting your faith, and what are you basing your happiness or your emotions on? And so another way, I want to say this really quick, because this was a big turning point in my career. When somebody hit a home run off me, instead of hating it, I changed to respecting it. And I started, there was a level of respect for somebody who got the better of me on the baseball field. And that changed a lot. That changed me tremendously. So I didn't hate it. When they hit a home run off me, I was like, okay, he's worked hard. He got me.
So
now before we go him next time.
Before we go any further, I just want to, one of the things that I like to work with athletes a lot on is mental training. And when you were playing at this level, did you have any training, like from the coaches or from someone who would come in to work with the players, on how to put all of this in perspective?
Oh, yes.
So they were doing that.
Yes, the Dodgers are a great organization. They left no stone unturned. So there was a guy named Ken Ravissa, and you may have heard of him. He is a wonderful sports psychologist. He is amazing. He and I would turn Dad told me to do everything you can, and that's what he showed me in his life. So I would turn every rock over to inspect how to get better. And when I discovered that my mental game was terrible, and I was on this roller coaster and I wanted to get off this roller coaster, I met Ken.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yes.
Because I'm always just curious, how much they use sports psychology in professional sports and especially when you were playing, because I feel like it was a newer something that not all teams were doing back then, but now I think it's more common.
That's true, Katie.
Thanks for sharing that.
All teams weren't. I would add this about the mental game. You can get to where I got with just physical ability. If you're gifted, but to go to the major leagues, AA, AAA, major league, that level, you would have to have a very strong mental game.
Keith, I
would add that.
I've been reading a little bit about your background. See that you went to Spartanburg Methodist. Am I correct in that?
Yes, sir. I went for 1 year. Yes, sir.
Was Coach Wallace there at the time?
Coach Wallace, that was his first year in '92. I played for him in his very first year.
So played for somebody who turned out to be a junior college legend.
Okay.
I would imagine that helped with the mental game a little bit too.
Yeah, well, let me tell you about the coach prior to him.
Okay.
Is my second dad.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, his name is Lon Joyce.
Yes, legend.
And, oh, man, Lon, it was amazing. Lon came to us in the fall, and I just got to SMC. I was a freshman. Lon came to us in the fall, and he goes, guys, I'm going to take a job with the Dodgers to be a full-time scout. And, we were shocked and disappointed, but happy at the same time for Lon, because everybody knew Lon, and everybody knew Lon was a baseball man and just this great coach. My second father, Lon Joyce. And so Tim Wallace comes in, and he made a comment to us. He was like, guys, you guys are good. He goes, I'm just going to let you guys play. And so he just gave us uniforms. And a quick story about Tim Wallace. He calls me into his office shortly after he got hired. And he said, Trout, that's what they called me. They called me Trout. He goes, you're going to be a closer. And I was like, okay, what's a closer?
Yeah.
And he said, well, he goes, with your attitude and your determination, I want you to come in the ninth inning when we're winning, and I want you to close the door in the game. And I thought about that. I said, could I pitch every day? That's the first question that I said. He goes, yes. And I said, I'm in. Yeah, I'm in. And so, yeah, that was great. Tim is a great man, a great coach, and has all my respect.
Wow. The one thing that kind of stands out to me right now in your journey is how many people have made a difference in where you are, how you were thinking, how you were playing. And that's one thing, everybody thinks, oh, it's just the athlete. They're by themselves. But in order to be great, you had to have so many people reach out to you and really help you learn and kind of show you the ropes and be your biggest supporters? I mean, of course, your dad was the first one, but then, we're only like starting your story. And I'm like, wow, look at how many people were significant in your life back then.
Yes, ma'am. Can I speak about some of these people?
Yes, please.
My high school baseball coach, Tim Miller. He took, again, these are people that I believe God put in my life. Tim Miller showed me how to play the game. He showed me how to present yourself. He showed me how to respect the game. He showed me how to work hard. There is a man that is from Asheville. His name is Darren Holmes. Darren Holmes was a Major League Baseball player from our area that I had met early in my career, and he got his start with the Dodgers as well. Darren Holmes helped me in so many ways with my relationship with God, with understanding Christ, with understanding how to be a man of God, even if you have millions in your pocket. A few more. Oral Hershiser. At one point, Oral Hershiser took me under his wing and showed me more about the mental game than anyone ever. Brett Butler, outfielder for the Braves, outfielder for the Dodgers, Indians. These were all men that I looked at and I wanted to emulate them, not only in baseball, but I wanted to emulate them in their walk with Christ.
At what point in your career, though, did that kind of take center field, if you will?
1994.
And so how long had you been playing then?
I had been playing for 2 years at that point.
Okay.
Professionally. Yes, okay. Professionally. And, I was looking at Oral Hershiser, Brett Butler, those guys, and they walked different. They talked different. They had something I didn't have. They had a confidence. They had a thought process. They had a security. They had some kind of faith in something that I didn't understand at the moment. And, God, one way that God pulled me in was He used baseball so much in my life, but I was looking for help. I got to a point in my baseball career, and not really in life did I recognize that I needed God at the time, but I thought that I needed God so that He would help my baseball career.
Interesting.
Yes, and I know that sounds extremely selfish, but even God uses our selfishness for His glory. And so I looked at Oral Hershiser. I went to baseball chapels on Sundays, and I decided I made the decision that Jesus died on the cross. He died for my sin, and God resurrected Him to defeat death. And if I believed that, then I would become a Christian. And that would guarantee, in my mind, at the time, in my mind, that was going to guarantee that my baseball career would be great. And I say that with a smile on my face. The best decision I've ever made.
Well, do you find that maybe because you were playing at the professional level that baseball wasn't just what you were doing, it became who you were?
It was definitely who I was at the moment. And I'll give you an example quickly. I was a baseball player. That was my identity. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of us put our identity in what we do. And even the spiritual gifts that God gives us could be idolized, and they could be out of perspective. So my intentions at the time were not for the glory of God. My intentions at the time were the glory for me.
Okay.
And shortly after I received Christ, I received news that my arm was dislocating when I threw
Oh my goodness.
the same year. And it was very painful. They call it subluxation. And here I am looking at Frank Jobe, the doctor who performed the first Tommy John surgery. He was the inventor of it. And he's telling me that I have to have reconstructive shoulder surgery.
Okay.
And I was floored. I got upset. I thought I see guys that had that surgery and they tried to come back and it just didn't work. So they told me I needed reconstructive surgery to be on a plane the next day to LA. And I'm 21 years old, just a new Christian, but my priorities were not straight then. My priorities were still baseball first. And I believe that God used that to show me where to put my priorities, my perspective on life. And so I asked Dr. Jobe, I said, what are the chances of me not having the surgery and still being able to pitch when I'm 30? And he said, not good. And he said, be on the plane tomorrow morning. And I said, as a 21-year-old person, I said, can I pray about it? And he said, you can go home and pray about it. And so I prayed that night, and I prayed for real for the first time. And God gave me, don't do it. He gave me an answer. And I went back to them the next day and I said, I'm not going to do it. And they said, okay, good luck. And I think they gave up on me then. I had another year with the Dodgers and I had a great year with no pain, but I had to do the rehab. I had to learn about rehab, and I had to do rehab every day of my career.
Wow.
I had to do some sort of shoulder maintenance every day, off season, in season, and I did it.
And you never had surgery?
No, ma'am. I did not have the surgery, and I still throw batting practice today.
That's amazing.
Praise God. Yes, ma'am.
So, okay. So let's fast forward a little bit. This is like your second year, and you have this shoulder problem that now you have to learn to take care of. So you learn all about physical therapy and making sure that you do it, because the consequences for you are, if you don't do this, you're really not going to be able to play. Correct?
Yes,
okay.
Right.
So I mean, like, that had to put you in a little bit of a tailspin with or without God on your side. You know, like, you're young. That's everything you know. So how did you handle that? I mean, were you just like, okay, I'm just going to do what it takes and I'll be fine? Or, you know, did you go into a little bit of a valley? I feel like when I talked to you, you said something to me about, you know, we get stronger when we're in the valley. Or you said, made some comment about that. And I'm like, okay, well, right now, you know, you seem like you're still climbing the mountain. And I'm assuming that baseball was not always climbing the mountain, that you were in the valley at some point. So kind of like, goodness. How did you know, things were going good, and then what happened?
Oh, yes. Well, oh my goodness. Yes.
Sorry if I'm asking asking big questions.
No, man, this is amazing. Praise God for the valleys. Praise God for the valleys, because it humbles us.
Yes.
I have found out there is nothing negative in this life. there are things that we're told that are negative. There are things that can feel negative, and we can believe they're negative. Everything goes to the glory of God, and this was the first example of that. I was already going to be the hardest working guy in this world. That's what my dad raised. Nobody was going to outwork me. And I drew the majority of my confidence in professional baseball came from if I was facing Derek Jeter, there is no way he did what I did in the off season. He did not work as hard as me.
So that gave you confidence.
Yes,
and that's something that I think that a lot of young people, as well as adults, you always need to remember that you gain your confidence from doing the work and knowing that nobody can work as hard as you.
Yes, ma'am. I would, and people, I think there's so many things that we were taught that are real. And there's so many, like, I'll give you an example. People say, well, I'm not a self-motivator. I'm not motivated to work out by myself. Well, I didn't have any other choice. I had to be. So I learned very early that it was a choice. It wasn't something I was born with. People talk about it. Well, I don't want to work out on my own. I'm not a self-motivated, I'm not self-motivated, but at that point, I mean, I had to work all day. We don't get paid very much in the minor leagues back then. And so I had to work all day to take care of things. And then I had to find time to work out because when spring training rolls around, you have to be in tip-top shape.
Right.
And so I found out that I was a self-motivated, and I could motivate myself and work out by myself at home. And I found out that was a choice, not something I've been given, or not something that was just settled. So, and again, Dad couldn't get enough praise for making me, for helping me realize to be self-motivated, to get your work done and make sure that you don't skip anything. There's no shortcuts and that sort of thinking. So yes, the work ethic was the foundation of my confidence at the time. And I was just going to outwork people.
How do you pass that work ethic on now to your students, be it baseball or guitar, when they get it, when they see the work pay off, when that light comes on? That's got to be a reward for you for passing that along to them, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. When I'm doing baseball and softball instruction, there's a time I've noticed, I call it the light bulb moment, when the mechanics that you're working on, it clicks with the player, and it becomes, it's a signal from the brain that goes down the nerves and it activates the muscles. When you do that over and over again, it gets more fluid, and people call it muscle memory. They wrongly call it muscle memory, but it's a signal from the brain to the muscles. And when you do that repeatedly, it gets, the signal gets quicker and it becomes natural feeling, which is what they call muscle memory. But yeah, when I get people and I want to try to instill work ethic in them, it's as simple as this. When you're in a game and you look at your opposition, you need to be able to think, there is no way this guy worked as hard as me. And I think that's a wonderful feeling. I didn't know what Derek Jeter did in his off seasons, but when I got against him, I can remember thinking, there's no way he worked as hard as me. And so even though he was physically, one of the greatest hitters of all time, I was still confident against him because of that fact. Yes, sir.
So, you kind of rehabbed this injury. You were able to keep playing, which I don't feel like a lot of times baseball players have a ton of longevity. I mean, early on, I feel like,
Yes.
An injury like that is kind of the end, which I'm sure you were probably worried about to start with. So you went
Yes.
on, you continued to play, and, everything just was roses, just went great. I mean, what were some of the hardest, what were the hardest things aside from being injured? Because that's, for an athlete, I think that's always going to be the number one. But what other challenges did you really face, like, as a professional athlete?
Keeping an idol status in perspective, walking out and having 5,000 people screaming, 10,000 people screaming your name and looking at you like you're some kind of public idol. I never had a problem being in public if I had a baseball uniform on.
Interesting.
If I didn't have a baseball uniform on, it was different.
So you felt like that was awkward, or you felt like you weren't worthy, or why did that feel like, instead of feeling like, oh, look what I've done, like people appreciate me, why was that such a challenge?
Well, because it was based on based on me.
Okay.
Didn't understand that I was actually playing for the glory of God.
Okay.
And to bring glory to Him. I was still confused about that, and God was growing me in that. But I would think, how am I playing for the glory of God? What does that even mean? I would think. I heard, Christian baseball players saying I'm playing for the glory of God, but I didn't really understand that at the time. I was like, well, I said, actually, in my mind, I was like, I'm actually really selfish. I mean, I'm trying to glorify me out here. I'm trying to get to the big leagues. I'm trying to do well. I'm trying to perform. So when it's in that perspective, it tilts back and forth, and you're back on that roller coaster.
That makes sense. I mean, I can see where that would be challenging, because I think any professional athlete, you have to put your training ahead of pretty much everything else in order to accomplish your goals, which also can kind of fall into that category of being selfish. Because you have to be, otherwise you can't really achieve what you need to. So that's a bit of a conundrum.
It is, and it led to my purpose. And actually, God used that, what you just said, to His purpose for me, which was to work with children.
Wonderful.
And when I got to the end of my career, I always said it like this: I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But now looking back, I say that sentence differently. I was in God's place in God's time.
So what brought the end of your career? What kind of was the final stroke there?
Okay, so I'm 29, and I'm coming off the best years of my life in AAA, and doing this very well, just excited. And I had 2 children at the time. They were 2 and 4.
Okay.
And my last spring training was with the Cardinals in 2000. And I literally cried all the way to Jupiter, because it was going to be another 11 months of selfish, away from home, traveling on the road, working out till 10 o'clock at night, getting up at 5, coming back home around 10 o'clock. And I just stopped.
So you'd already been doing that for a couple of years while the kids were really little.
They were 2 and 4 when I retired.
How did that impact you mentally?
It got me because I stood there the first spring training in 2001, and I was fishing, and I can remember saying this out loud. Who am I? I said that out loud. I said, who am I? I'm not a baseball player anymore.
So who were you besides a man of God?
Well, God was revealing who I was at the time. And I said, well, I'm a father. So I'm going to be the best father I can be. And that's who I am. I'm a father. And so, I went and I left where I was fishing that day, the first day of spring training, which was extremely weird. And I had offers I had gotten an offer to play in a couple of places, and I had gotten an offer from the Dodgers to be a pitching coach eventually. And so I had to think about those decisions, but I said, no, I'm done with travel. I'm done with airplanes, and I want to be home, and I want to watch my kids grow up, and I want to be a good father is what I wanted.
And you made that happen.
Yes, ma'am.
Congratulations.
Yes, I surely failed in many ways, but I've dedicated myself to being the best father I can be. And
now your kids are all grown up, and you've got grandkids?
Yes, ma'am. They're 27, 25, and 20, my children.
Wow.
And I have three grandchildren. I have 2 boys and a girl.
And so is it at that time that you started coaching kids?
Oh, wow. This is when God really started building me.
Okay.
Oh, wow. These guys came to my door. I signed my daughter up for softball, my oldest daughter, Mara. And I got a knock on the door, and it was some guys, and they said, hey, didn't you play a little professional baseball? I think they said semi-professional, like some people play I don't know. They said, didn't you play a little semi-professional baseball? And I was like, yeah. And they said, well, why don't you coach the girls? And I laughed, and I shut the door.
Uh-oh.
I said, no, thank you. And, and I said, nope, I'm going to be on a lawn chair. I'm going to sit there and watch my kids. And I'm going to just relax and enjoy them. You know, I'd been in baseball my whole life, and I wanted to relax and have fun.
Of course.
In the game, instead of it being, life or death every time. And they came to the door again. And I said, no, I do not want to coach. The third time they came, I felt God all 3 times. And the third time I said, okay, I'll help you. I will help you guys. And as soon as I stepped on the field with the girls, I knew that was my purpose. I knew that's what the purpose that God had laid in front of me.
One of the greatest coaches in the history of South Carolina, won 380 football games, won 10 state championships. Also coached a couple of girls' basketball teams to a state championship, and he told me one time that if you could get them to believe in you, that girls players would give you so much more than boys players of comparable ability. He said those girls, if you could get them to believe in you, would just sell out, would do anything you asked them to do. Have you found that to be the case in coaching girls? Do you see the minute when you talked about light bulb moments, do you see those light bulbs come on?
That's a whole podcast there.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a whole, literally.
And we can come back and do that. Jed's just over there asking big questions.
Well, I would like to answer that quickly.
Yeah.
I've asked this question so many times to males and females. I say, who was your favorite coach growing up? And they say a name, or they say a couple of names, either way. And I follow up with this question, why was that your favorite coach? And I know the answer, but I think it's good for us to understand that a coach is a symbol of Jesus. And when they represent Jesus, even if they don't believe in Jesus, if they represent the characteristics of Jesus, they'll instantly become their favorite coach. And so what I found out is that the kid's favorite coach is a coach that cares about them or loves them. They don't have to be the greatest winner. They don't have to make all the right calls, which none of us do. And the crazy thing about coaching is if you call a bunt and it works, you're a genius. If you call a bunt and it doesn't work, then you're not a genius.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. I mean, it just in itself that. But yeah, I believe in order to be a great coach, you would take the characteristics of Jesus and you would apply them in your coaching. And that means that you love your player like Jesus loves us.
I think coaching adults, I think that's true for adults too.
Yes, ma'am.
Definitely. And I've never looked at it that way, that's for sure. But that's a very interesting perspective. And I mean, one I will definitely give some thought to here over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Can I say one more thing, Katie?
Yeah, sure.
All the coaches that I had hard coaches. I had easy coaches. I had quiet, loud. And there were coaches in my life that I truly believed that they cared about me. And Gary Templeton, he was traded straight up for Ozzie Smith from the Cardinals to the Padres. Gary Templeton was a manager of mine in 1999, and I truly thought that he cared about me and my future. And that's all it took. I mean, he's a great baseball man and so calm. He's not a yeller. He doesn't freak out. And I started looking at the way Gary Templeton coached us and his leadership, and I said, this is a lot like Jesus. This is a lot like how they describe Jesus. So in my coaching over the years, I said, I will do my very best to apply the characteristics of Jesus in my coaching.
Wow.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a pretty significant thing to say.
And when it's an example like Templeton, it resonates a little bit more.
Yeah.
It carries a little bit more.
I mean, big league player,
yeah.
Great shortstop, and, already getting revered by everyone anyway.
But I think in this day and age, when we look at so much poor behavior from coaches, athletes, people in general, that when you kind of swing the entirely opposite direction and say, like, lead like Jesus, be kind, you can still get results and be kind and caring and just be that person.
Yes.
That says a lot right there. Because it's just, when you look at everything, I mean, Jed, you see everything. And it's like, but the greatest coaches out there, those are the ones who are just above all of that nonsense.
Yeah.
They really are. When you start looking at all sports, it doesn't matter what sport it is.
Right.
So, very, very interesting. So as we kind of wrap this up today, I mean, I think that's the biggest thought you can kind of leave us with, for sure. At least I'm sitting here going, wow, that was
Yeah.
amazing. What, going forward now, you're still working with youth, and we'll have in the coach notes, like how people can reach out to you, to be able to work with you. You also are a guitarist and you give instruction.
Yes.
And you told me that you were working on kind of having your own coaching facility, maybe in Travelers Rest eventually. So,
Yes.
I mean, you're still very much so involved in the sport and involved with the youth and the community. And I'm sure people outside our community come to work with you as well. So, what's one thing you just want to leave us with?
Okay, so there is truth. There is absolute truth. Recognition of absolute truth is the key in anything that you do. It's the key to confidence. It's the key to everything. So think about what churches are sending out absolute truth. Knowledge of the absolute truth is a key, but it's the application of that absolute truth that is equally as important. So, for instance, and I'm strong enough to say this. I went to church for years and years and years, and I heard absolute truth. It only was God truly changed me into what you have here when I applied the absolute truth. So it was always a question for me. So I knew what to do, but I didn't always do it. And I'm not saying that I always do it every time. I'm not saying that at all. But I took God's word and I said, I'm going to physically apply this in my decision making, in my emotions, in my daily walk. When I made the decision to commit fully, my life changed. My temper was cooled. My thinking was straight. My actions were sharp. My intentions changed. My intentions changed to the glory of God, not to the glory of man. Things I'd heard my whole life became obviously of the world. Things became clear to me. So I would say if you break down great hitters, there are three things all those hitters are doing consistently. There are three things every one of those hitters are doing. Male, female, doesn't matter. So recognition of those three things is hearing absolute truth. And then to progress, you would have to apply those three things. And it's wonderful when somebody focuses on if a hitter's struggling and there's a coach that is putting focus on something other than those three things, it doesn't work. And it's great that it doesn't work because it forces the player to say, well, I got to find something that does work. And that describes how God built me in my life. There were things that I were putting my faith in and it wasn't working. And so when I found the truth, the absolute truth, and then I applied that absolute truth in my life, it got great. And I found out that life is great. It's not bad like they told me. Life is great. So I would say to anyone with ears to hear God's absolute truth and then to go another step and apply that truth in your life and jump in the water, because it's great.
Thank you. Thank you for that great advice.
Yes, ma'am.
I know everybody can take that to their lives and apply it. And we really appreciate having you and your time today. Just very interesting listening to all of your stories and lessons. And, maybe some other time we'll have you back on to talk about the difference in coaching boys and girls. That would be a very interesting one. But
yes, ma'am. Thank you, guys.
For now, I'm going to wrap this up since Kevin isn't here. We're going to say, do the hard things today so tomorrow can take care of itself.